It is my pleasure to introduce Wes and Sarah Kotyk. Are you in the room somewhere, Wes and Sarah? Fabulous. When I talked to Wes on the phone, he emphasized that his chief claim to fame was that he was Daniel's dad, Daniel being his son. Now Wes proved to be a very humble sort of an individual. He wasn't very prone to blowing his own horn or anything like that, but I did find out this much about him. He grew up in Regina, but saw the light. His family's moved to Saskatoon for 14 years now. Don is an engineer by trade with the Ministry of Environment for the province, and his specific field is geological engineering, which I think is quite impressive. Now Sarah completed her Bachelor of Arts degree from the U of S, St. Thomas More College in June, majoring in psychology and minoring in Catholic studies, and she now works for Corrections Canada at the Regional Psychiatric Centre in health services. She teaches ballet 2 evenings a week. She volunteers with St. Anne's Church youth group, which would be an involved process all by itself, and she volunteers with Saskatoon Pure Fashion. So this is a busy young woman. Most importantly, she is the absolute best big sister to Daniel, according to her mom, Carrie. So life is an interaction, and nowhere is that interaction more evident than in families. So Wes is joined by his daughter Sarah, and they will tag team on this talk for about 10 minutes. So we look forward to hearing about the challenges, the opportunities, the interactions, and especially about the victories that your family has experienced. So please welcome Wes and Sarah.
Thank you, Tom, for that introduction. It's our pleasure to be here today and speak to you about our experience living with a family member with autism, more specifically, Daniel. I thought I'd start with a brief overview to give everyone a bit of insight into Daniel. He was born in July of 1997 and is now 15 years old. We moved to Saskatoon when Daniel was 9 months old and Sarah was in grade 2. Daniel was officially diagnosed with having autism when he was 3 years and 3 months old. At that time, the numbers were 1 in 500 children were being diagnosed with autism. Recent numbers, I believe, are 1 in 88. We weren't surprised at the diagnosis, as we had come to terms with this well in advance, as we had noticed developmental challenges by the time he was 2. We just had to wait for the system to officially tell us we could start with any treatments available. Once he was diagnosed, we started to speak to all kinds of professionals and looked for programs to enroll him in. We focused on occupational therapy, speech and language pathology. We visited with psychologists, pediatricians, autism services consultants, social workers, and once he entered the school system, we met with teachers, EAs, and school therapists. Basically, we were looking for everything we could do to make things better for Daniel. And yes, there were times where we were hoping new treatments or therapies would cure Daniel. We looked to get him into as many programs as we could, in hopes that each program or activity would help in some way. Most did to some extent over time. And activities that Daniel enjoys include swimming, bowling, gymnastics, summer camps, and horseback riding. Lately he's had some difficulty and hasn't been getting on the horse. We're not sure if this is due to some anxiety or fear, or if he's just decided that he doesn't want to ride any longer.
Daniel's favorite things include balls, placemats, small toys, shredding paper, music, movies, traveling, looking at photographs, swimming, the beach, outdoors in the summer, and staying at hotels. I've always been close with Daniel, and I've always considered him a huge blessing in my life and for our family. I don't ever remember a time when he wasn't my most favorite person in the world. Even when he was first diagnosed and in the habit of hitting me as hard as he could on the top of the head, or when I would constantly find him in my room with my whole collection of Beanie Babies on my bed with him, or when he went through his very short biting phase, he was still the most important person to me. I didn't realize how important he was to me until I was older, but he's always been more important to me than I imagined he would be if he were a typical younger brother. I have many memories of things that made me so happy or proud that wouldn't really cause a second thought if they were done by someone who wasn't autistic. The memory that stands out most was when I was in grade 7 and I was sitting at a coffee table opening gifts at my birthday party. Daniel was in his room, avoiding the crowd like usual. Sometime during the opening process, Daniel came running out of his room, came straight to me, took my face in his hands, one hand on each cheek, and looked me straight in the eye with such love, a huge smile, and a beautiful spark in his eyes. I could see so much of him in there that we didn't usually get to see. You may or may not know, but a lack of eye contact is a common characteristic that many people with autism possess. Thankfully, my dad managed to get a picture, and it's still my most treasured photo.
Daniel had many challenges over the years. Some are more of a challenge for us than for him. We went through years of Daniel sleeping in our room. Finally, when he was about 12, he just started spending more and more time in his own bed. When I look back now, I can't really think of any event that changed things. It was just a progressive thing. Once in a while, he'll still crawl into bed with us, but only for a few minutes or so. Sleep was a big issue. When he was a few years old, he would wake up in the night and stay awake for the rest of the night, usually around 1 or 2 a.m. This would go on for days in a row. He's better now, but he still rarely sleeps entirely through the night. He'll usually fall back asleep on his own at some point. Other than getting him some juice or a snack, he can keep himself occupied during the night if he needs to. Daniel has improved his communication over the years, although it's still quite limited. He has no problem repeating exactly what you say, and quite often this means yes if he repeats what we ask. There are very few things he will ask for without prompting. Food or juice are 2 examples. Lately it's been shorts on. He's wanted to wear shorts for the last month. He'll ask about when one of his activities is going to occur next, like swimming, or when is the bus coming. If we ask him something and his answer is no, he will say no, not today. If he's really adamant, he will say no, not today, not today, not today. He will ask questions about when someone is coming home. Questions like, Sarah come home, Mommy come home, where's Sarah? And we heard this many times last summer.
I spent this past summer in Halifax, and the hardest part of it for me wasn't living in a house with 8 other girls or having a schedule that only allowed for about 5 hours of sleep each night. It was being away from Daniel. I couldn't call, Skype, email, text message, or even write a letter to him. I had to go over 3 months without hearing him say my name or hear him repeat, I love you to me. At one point in the summer, I was even missing his loud noises that usually give me a headache. It wasn't even so much me being apart from him that was hard, because I knew that I would see him again at the end of the summer. It was more the fact that I didn't know how he felt about me not being at home with him. Anyone else in my family could listen to my explanation of where I was going, what I was doing, and what it meant to me. Daniel, on the other hand, didn't sit down and have a conversation with me before I left. So how did I know that he knew I was happy where I was, and that I was even more happy that I was going to come home and see him?
When Daniel was younger, we could make arrangements for respite care with grandparents, regular babysitters, and even regular childcare. As Daniel got older and more challenging, our regular childcare provider could not watch Daniel any longer. So in order for Carrie to continue working, we found a caregiver to come into our home. This ended up not working out, and so after a year, Carrie decided to change to casual work so she could be home when Daniel wasn't in school. When Sarah was old enough, we relied on her to babysit if we needed to be out or wanted an evening to ourselves. Sarah was perfect, as she knew Daniel almost as well as we did, and he loves her and quite often will listen better to Sarah than he does for us. However, since Sarah was getting so busy with school, dancing, and work, we knew we would need other alternatives as well. Since Daniel was about 8, we've been utilizing the respite care home in Elmwood, where Daniel would go for the weekends and eventually on longer stays if we took a vacation. Even this service has taken a turn as we've been receiving calls in the last few events to pick him up due to issues we've been having with him. We're now working on a strategy to build up his comfort again. We also have a couple of other individuals willing to come into our home, and we'll need to look at expanding this soon, especially in the event if we can no longer rely on the respite care home to accommodate Daniel. Even now, while Daniel is at respite, Carrie's regularly checking her phone to see if we're going to get a call to pick him up. It makes it difficult to relax and enjoy the moment.
Daniel does not play interactively to any great extent. However, he enjoys being around people and he observes us from a distance. This last Christmas, he sat with me and my cousins at their dinner table for a long time while the rest of us ate. And sometimes he starts to sit longer than he used to.
When Daniel was little, he fought with seatbelts and had an issue with the vehicle stopping whenever it was to pick somebody up or even at a red light. You'd be surprised how creative you can be and get almost anywhere taking just right-hand turns so you don't have to stop and wait at lights. Now Daniel would travel in the vehicle non-stop if we let him, and seatbelts, stopping, and waiting don't bother him anymore. He's a great traveler. We even drove down to Disneyland in September, and he did fine for the most part. Meltdowns have taken on a different look lately. When he was little, it would be a typical tantrum of kicking and screaming, and lasting for maybe an hour or two before he would calm down. He was also smaller and could be removed from the situation much more easily. As Daniel got older, the length of the meltdown would become shorter, partly due to medication, but the meltdown also included banging and damaging of walls. This is probably our biggest challenge. Now that Daniel is a fair size, not too many people are comfortable or able to deal with Daniel if he's lashing out and needs calming down. Typical meltdown triggers include telephones. Daniel's had some issue with Carrie or me talking on the telephone. Even if the ringer goes off, he has an issue with it and it can trigger a meltdown. It's okay though for Sarah to talk on the telephone, or for us to use our cell phones for very short periods of time, and it seems to not be an issue for anyone else when we're visiting or in their houses.
Disruption in routine can also be a meltdown trigger. Structure plays a huge role in Daniel's life, but then again it does for our entire family. The difference for Daniel is understanding that sometimes a lack of structure is just out of our control. Daniel needs structure in scheduled events, daily routine, people associated with different parts of his life, and even in verbal responses. Just trying saying later when he is expecting a response of tomorrow, and you'll see what I mean. Daniel has improved somewhat if things get switched up, as long as we give him adequate notice, and if we use the right time description for when the replaced activity will occur again. Sensitivity to sound has always been something of a concern. When he was little, deep male voices usually upset him. Now it's higher-pitched sounds that seem to bother him. If he hears the piped in laughter from sitcoms, he'll tell us to turn off the TV. If we don't quick enough, it'll send him into a meltdown. Certain female singers, especially country, will upset him. Sometimes he'll either tell us to turn off the radio or run into his room and close the door, or it can lead to a meltdown.
Daniel's concept of time is very interesting. Although he does not understand when each month occurs or what day of the week or month it is, certain terms have distinct time ranges that he can accept. Something that is happening today will be explained by saying later or the time that it occurs, like church at 5 o'clock or bus at 8:20. If it's going to happen tomorrow, we can say tomorrow. We can also use the day of the week for certain activities if it's not going to occur within the next couple of days. What we did find out recently is that to Daniel, tomorrow isn't always necessarily tomorrow. Tomorrow to him can be tomorrow or in the next couple of days. It just means it's not today, but it's coming soon. We had a few meltdowns with Daniel until we figured that one out. There are a number of other challenges we won't get into additional detail for the sake of time, and they include things like diet, toileting, sensory issues, medication, and transitioning.
I've never felt like I missed out on anything from having a brother with autism. Yeah, maybe it would have been nice to go for dinner with all four of us together, but other than that, the only thing that seemed different to me was that I didn't have to go to a large amount of sporting events to support Daniel, and for that, I'm extremely thankful. We still went on holidays, we still went to church, I still got to take all the activities I desired, I still had to have sleepovers as a young girl, and I could invite friends over to my house. It was all just done differently. It's hard for me to be able to explain the differences because it's normal to me. Something that is commonplace in a different family never even arose for ours.
Daniel has a very unique personality. He is the source of many sounds. He has an innate ability to imitate sounds almost exactly. He'll imitate power tools, vehicles, and animals. He also likes to bellow as loud as possible, which we think is a sensory issue. Our challenge is to keep Daniel from blurting out his sounds in inappropriate places, or times like church or movies.
Daniel has the greatest sense of humor. He'll always come running into the room if he hears someone laughing, and then he joins it in too. He'll do things that he knows annoys others. He makes certain sounds that he knows annoy me, and he waits for my reaction with a huge grin on his face. He knows the rules and is continually testing us to see if we're paying attention, like playing with balls in the living room.
Daniel usually enjoys when company comes over. This doesn't always work the greatest for Carrie, as she often is required to get into her pajamas before Daniel will settle down. Depending on Daniel's mood, it can change the outcome of any visiting we do. A couple of weeks ago, he wouldn't settle down, and he actually was telling our company to put on their coats and go now. Daniel loves family and enjoys visiting grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins whenever he can. He will recite the names of all his relatives and loves looking at their pictures. He also regularly asks when we will be going to visit them next.
Over the summer, there were moments that made me realize that Daniel knows much more than we give him credit for. He had been around many of the times as I explained my mission trip that was taking me to Halifax to my mom. He saw me packing my bags and frantically running around the last few days before my departure, and he just knows me. One event that really made me stop in my tracks was about a month before I was returning home. I was seriously considering staying in Halifax after the summer mission was done. But the major thing that was stopping me from making that final decision was my worry about how it would affect Daniel. I didn't know what to do, so I simply prayed that he would know. Within the next couple of days, my mom told me that Daniel had come up to her out of nowhere and said, "Sarah's happy, very happy." Since Daniel does not speak sentences like that often, my mom asked him, "What?" And he repeated himself. I knew then that he definitely understands what is going on around him much more than we give him credit for.
Some things we've learned from living with Daniel are that we have to be patient. If Daniel decides he doesn't want to do or can't do something, even if he's done it for a long time, we learn to accept it. Some days he might not be able to, or his interests may have changed. Everyone has likes and dislikes. Daniel just has a tougher time expressing himself and communicating them to us. Change in routine causes everyone anxiety. With Daniel, it's compounded. Ask Carrie what happens if there's a detour or a roadblock. I'm the same when last-minute meetings or schedule changes are imposed on me. I have difficulty dealing with things beyond my control. We need to try to maintain a positive attitude and enjoy the calm and happy times. It's been an effort over the years to try to maintain some sanity when issues arise and spiral for Daniel. We've improved at this skill over the years, but have not quite mastered it yet. We have a number of worries for Daniel's future. This is a big unknown for us. What will Daniel do when he's finished school? Who will care for him in the future when we're not able to? What will Daniel's living arrangements be? We also tend to question whether we've done the best things for Daniel. Should we have done more of a certain therapy, tried different things? Was the timing right? Is it too late for further improvements? Maybe if we did things differently when Daniel was younger, he wouldn't have the same challenges today.
Something that has always been hard for me that I still struggle with increasingly as Daniel gets older is dealing with people who do not understand or people that are being truly mean. I'm sure I would be a protective older sister with a typical younger brother, but it's magnified when Daniel cannot speak up for himself. I've seen children teasing and taunting Daniel and felt helpless for him when I saw his shoulders lowered and his head hung low. I've seen adults in public give our family a look that says, "Can't you control him?" when Daniel makes some of his interesting noises. I've even had a psychology professor in university make some extremely inaccurate generalizations while teaching a class with over 200 students that would take that information and believe it to be true of all people with autism. I'm so happy for the programs and services that Autism Services provides for our family and for Daniel. He gets to attend activities with people that understand that he is autistic and what that means, and who come to love him because of it. Because of this organization, many more people are becoming aware of the realities of autism, and more families like ours are getting support.
By trying not to dwell on our fears and Daniel's challenges, and with a combination of faith and support from friends, family, and caring professionals, we're able to generally maintain a positive attitude, which gives us hope for a good future for Daniel. In closing, we would like to thank each of you here today for supporting Autism Services. Your support enables Daniel to participate in some very valuable and beneficial programs that he enjoys and provides us with some valuable resources. A saying I would like to leave with you that helps give us some perspective is that being happy doesn't mean everything's perfect. It means you decide to see beyond the imperfections. Thank you and have a great evening.